So, good morning, everybody. This morning is the 17th of June and it is the IAB coffee morning. We have a payroll HR theme this morning with two fabulous speakers. Fiona from CIPP will be speaking, and Gemma Baxter as well, and from Hive HR. Sorry, Gemma. So just before we start though, just a couple of points from me. So I'm up at HQ, at the London Chamber this morning. I just wanted to just summarise the relationship with the London Chamber as well, because I'm not sure everybody is entirely clear. So we are the education partner of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We host their bookkeeping and accountancy payroll qualifications under the Ofqual regulations. Now, we host those globally on behalf of the London Chamber as well. Mariska, there is a link I can just put into the chat. So the London Chamber has a bi-monthly magazine, and I've written an article in there in the current one at the moment. It's a hard copy and it's online too, but Mariska's just going to put the link to the article that I wrote in the chat. So if you want to spend some time and just understand that a little bit more, then please do. The article is on page 51. Other news for us today, we actually have Malaysian government officials in the building. So we are signing another agreement with them this afternoon. So what we have organised too is that we are delivering the qualifications to the school leavers across Malaysia as well. So we're the partner with them to deliver that, which is quite exciting. So it's already been in progress, but now we have the official documentation to say we are their Malaysian government's partners. So just thought I'd share the good news as it's happening live here at the moment. So anyway, right, Fiona is going to be taking us through some technical content. So let me introduce Fiona for you. So Fiona Smith, sorry, let me just pull this up here. So the new Fair Work Agency marks a significant shift in how worker rights will be enforced, and payroll professionals will be at the centre of it. Fiona Smith, Training Manager at the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals, CIPP to us, oversees the delivery of specialist payroll training aligned with legislative compliance, operational best practice and professional standards. With over 15 years' experience in payroll and education, Fiona is committed to equipping payroll professionals with the skills and knowledge to navigate an increasingly complex regulatory landscape. So Fiona is going to take us through a 30-minute session designed specifically for us, and we'll break down what the new agency means in practice and highlighting areas of the payroll most likely to come under scrutiny. So, Fiona, over to you.
Good morning. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for that introduction, Sarah. Really pleased to be here this morning to, I guess, give you an overview from a payroll perspective and a compliance perspective around what it means now we have a new government body called the Fair Work Agency. As Sarah said, I am from the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals. So for those of you who don't know us, we are responsible for looking after the pay profession and advocating for all things payroll, as well as providing educational products to help upskill payroll professionals and make sure that essentially everyone knows what they need to do to be compliant. So I've been asked to speak to you a little bit about the new, like I say, government body, the Fair Work Agency, which is going to shake things up really within payroll and within the world of enforcing employment rights. So the Fair Work Agency was formed from this April. It's been in talks for quite a long time. It's been a kind of objective of the government to ensure that there is a single place where workers can go to enforce worker rights, and where employers and other interested parties can go to for guidance and support, and really understanding what it is that they need to do to be compliant. So the actual new body is part of the Department for Business and Trade. So it will sit within that department, but it acts as a enforcement and overseer of different employment rights, which up until now have had kind of different ways of being able to be enforced. So, for example, an employee who had an issue with their national minimum wage, that would have been HMRC's remit. And HMRC was responsible for auditing employers for compliance, as well as investigating whistleblowing accounts and so on. But when you came to a different employment right, very closely connected around holiday leave and pay, underpayment for someone who maybe has been earning variable wages, you actually found that there was no single body that you could go to. It was down to each individual employee to make a claim via the employment tribunals. And in a similar vein, statutory sick pay was HMRC's responsibility for investigating whistleblowing and enforcing of statutory payments. However, some of the decisions were made in employment tribunal and case law. So what it means to have a Fair Work agency is that all of these different strands, where it would have been different approaches to enforcement and I guess less clear rules, are being brought together into this one body. That means that this body then will have that oversight to investigate employers and potentially bring civil or criminal proceedings. So it was going to be effectively a one-stop shop for these types of activities. It also brings together other strands beyond just payroll, including the Gangmaster and Labour Abuse Authority, the Director of Labour Market Enforcement, and the Employment Agency Standards Inspectorate. So also looking after agency work and those types of employment arrangements. So what are they setting out to do? So from April, they published their the website went live. We got some more information about what they're really intending to focus on in this first year. So this will be a year of transition, if you like. They've confirmed that their overall statement or their intention is to enforce workers' rights by helping employers to comply with the law and also taking action where they do not. So at the moment, enforcement with the national minimum wage is still sitting with HMRC, at least for this financial year. But they will be working closely with the Fair Work Agency, and at some point those powers will shift over to the Fair Work Agency, who will become the enforcement body for national minimum wage. We also see closer scrutiny around employment agencies. We've seen some calls for evidence and consultations around umbrella companies and agency work, and ensuring that that is a more regulated market. So again, that will come towards the Fair Work Agency for that kind of single voice. We see a real focus on particular sectors where there have historically been non-compliance with employment standards. So agriculture, food, the gig economy, we can see a real focus being made in those kind of areas. So watch this space. And then they've indicated as well that the intention is to support employers, but where they do find those situations where employers are engaged in serious exploitation or abuse, or who are deliberately flouting the rules, they will be taking proactive action. So we see a sort of shift. Minimum wage has always been quite proactive. You can be subject to a minimum wage audit at any point, but we'll also see a shift for those other employment rights, so holiday pay, statutory sick pay, and so on, to a more proactive approach to enforcement. They also have within their remit the ability to penalise employers for not complying with employment tribunal awards. So if a decision is made against you in an employment tribunal, there is a time scale by which you have to remedy whatever the court has deemed is necessary. And until now, enforcement of that timescale of making sure that those awards go through has been sporadic. So that will again fall into the remit of the Fair Work Agency. So making sure that you're aware of any of these and getting them processed appropriately is going to be really important. As far as their powers go, they are, like I said, they are a new body at the moment, and so they're currently going through a transition year where a lot of these powers have either been well, they've been given to the Fair Work Agency from April 2027, but they may be administratively sitting in other areas. So the Fair Work Agency, as I say, we're seeing that shift to a more proactive approach where they will be able to inspect and investigate employers. So you may have to be able to produce evidence of compliance in areas where up till now the only enforcement route has been effectively employees claiming in employment tribunals. They also have the powers to make sure that employers put things right, as we say, enforcing those decisions that have been made in the court and making sure that situations are remedied. On top of that, we can actually see the thornier part of the stick, if you like, that they'll be able to, like we currently see with minimum wage, issue additional financial penalties on top of ensuring that employers remedy non-compliance with employment rights, and even all the way through to potential legal action in that arena. So if we take this into something a bit more practical, what can we do to make sure that we're as prepared as possible for this Fair Work Agency and, like I say, the shift in evidence requirements or shift in approach? The biggest thing that we can do is make sure that we've audited our current accounts, our current clients, your current SLAs, your processes, to ensure that you are as comfortable as you can be with the compliance rules and that you can evidence compliance in all cases. National minimum wage should be the most straightforward because this is something that we have always had the responsibility to evidence compliance with. But as a reminder, things that you need to be concentrating on for minimum wage and where a lot of employers can fall down in this arena is ensuring that you have clear records of time worked. So national minimum wage may seem like a straightforward calculation that someone's paid the right amount per hour for every hour that they work. However, anyone who's been involved in a national minimum wage audit or dug even slightly below the surface knows that it's not that straightforward. Identifying what counts as working time versus time that an employee isn't working can be not so straightforward, and identifying the payments that are eligible or count towards the minimum wage and vice versa, the deductions that actually reduce minimum wage within a pay period can be a complex thing. So making sure that with your clients, anyone you are operating a payroll for, you have very clear understanding of what time employees are actually working, even salaried staff, which sounds against the grain, but it's becoming more of a high profile issue to understand when your employees are working. Understand what payments are being made and how that's broken down. Any discretionary pay, anything like that does not count towards the minimum wage. And also if there are any deductions made in that pay period that could reduce the minimum wage. On top of that, it's a good idea, if you can, to have a record of how you calculate compliance with the minimum wage, what processes you do, and a record of doing those processes each pay period or as necessary to comply with the minimum wage. This is because generally when HMRC, or the Fair Work Agency as it will be, conduct an audit, the onus is on you to evidence compliance, not the other way round. So HMRC can take your records and do calculations and make best estimates, but then you're putting the power in their hands. Whereas if you can detail exactly, this is how we did the calculations and this is why we believe it's compliant, you're much more likely to pass an audit. As has always been the case with the minimum wage, we have to make sure that any records of the above are retained for at least 6 years, as that's how far back an audit can and will go on this topic. Last reminder on minimum wage is to make sure that you are treating different types of work differently. So when it comes to minimum wage calculations, how you identify compliance with the minimum wage for a salaried worker is different from a time worker, is different from an output worker. And again, sometimes these categories are not always straightforward. So make sure that you have a record of why you've identified the type of work as that, and how it's been calculated from there. Again, that will really help you to solidify A, that you are compliant, and B, evidence that compliance if needed. Our next main area that affects payroll is around holiday leave and pay. So up until now, there's been huge changes in how to be compliant with holiday pay. We've seen variable pay having to be added into the calculation. We've seen overtime. We've seen the changes to workers who don't work every week, irregular and part-year workers last year. Now we are in a more settled situation. So the rules have kind of settled down. And so again, now is a perfect time to look at and define with your clients how holiday pay is identified, so how someone's entitlement is calculated, and keep a record of that. How do you identify when holiday is actually taken, so that you can evidence that the worker received the right amount of pay while they were on holiday periods? So that one's tricky. Again, for salaried workplaces, sometimes holiday is not recorded, but it's not a requirement, I will say, but it's going to make your life easier if you can start recording logs of holiday taken. Identifying how you then calculate the pay that someone is entitled to when they take that holiday. So again, like with minimum wage, there can be different calculations for different categories of worker. So how have you identified which type of worker you're looking at, and how have you calculated the holiday pay for them? Which elements are included, which elements are excluded, and what's the rationale behind that? Again, this may be part of an SLA or a kind of agreement with your client. Ultimately, the responsibility for compliance with all of these areas sits with the employer. But we know generally many employers are not focused on this area. They're expecting you to advise and assist and help with compliance, and hopefully won't blame you if things go wrong, but it's a good idea to say, if you want us to be completely compliant, these are the, this is the information and this is the level of detail that we need for full compliance. So yeah, holiday leave and pay. In 30 minutes, I'm not going to go into how to calculate holiday leave and pay, but hopefully, like I say, that's that conversation with your client and recording that and having it kind of able to pull out to show at an audit. Very sneakily, that's quite a judgment, but surprisingly, a requirement to now keep holiday pay records has come in from this April. It was brought in very last minute, very quietly, but it is now a legal requirement, like it is for minimum wage records, to retain holiday leave and pay records for at least 6 years. So you can see immediately from that coming in that there is going to be a similar sort of approach to holiday leave and pay, being able to go back into arrears and like I say, audit records and prove your compliance. So for the moment, I will say, this is all supposition based on what we know and what we know the intent of the Fair Work Agency is. But in fairness, it is good practice anyway to have this documented and retain these records. So it's definitely part of your considerations. Our last area that we can see coming into this enforcement activity is statutory sick pay. Now, we've had a change to statutory sick pay this year. Many more employees now may become eligible as it's going to be payable to low earners and people from day one of sickness. So the admin burden for recording and administering statutory sick pay has increased slightly this year, which I'm sure you're all very aware of. But again, what we see here is making sure that you have the required records and the ability to prove compliance. So as a minimum, you want to be keeping and recording any periods of sickness that are taken. I'd recommend, and this is not a statutory requirement, but I'd recommend keeping periods of sickness even for those salaried staff that may be receiving full occupational pay. It's the clearest way to ensure that you don't end up underpaying SSP because it is a minimum payment, a statutory payment for the employee. So making sure you keep records of periods of sickness, making sure for any period of sickness, you keep a record of the calculation of SSP, so how you've worked out how much SSP is due. Historically, it's only been one flat weekly rate, but now for low earners, we have to pay a percentage of their earnings. So making sure you've got it recorded how that is calculated. And of course, through the pay slips, evidence of any payments made, and particularly where you have refused to pay SSP because of one of the exclusion criteria, such as someone who has run out of their 28 weeks of SSP or is excluded for another reason. Any SSP1 forms must be kept to evidence why statutory sick pay hasn't been paid for that type of absence. And what do you guess? We have a similar sort of retention period for these records as well. 6 years is ideal, again, to evidence that compliance as you go. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour, not to frighten anybody or to make you too concerned. This year, as the Fair Work Agency is stepping into its power, is very much about, like I say, making sure that your records and your payroll information is easily accessible, is clear, is able to be pulled at fairly short notice. So treat it as audit data and have it, ready for inspection so that you're confident any payroll that, any employer that is required to produce these records, you'd be able to do it without having to scramble and create lots of ad hoc reports and so on. So it's just about getting your house in order effectively and being as prepared as you can be. So that leads me on to essentially if we've got any questions that have come in from the chat. The CIPP is here to help with all of this. So if you're not already engaged with the CIPP or you haven't heard of us before, I would definitely recommend taking a look at our website. There are plenty of ways that you can engage with us, certainly not least by becoming a member and getting access to our wonderful advisory service, who are more than happy to help on a range of different queries. So Sarah, I don't know if we've got any questions that have come in.
Oh no, I think we've all been sat in silence, this listening. So
Good.
thank
Okay,
you,
that's
Fiona.
fine.
That was absolutely brilliant. It's one of those changes that can sometimes go under the radar, isn't it? Or we're not fully aware of the powers that these new agencies actually have been given.
Yeah.
So the chat's been a little bit quiet. The main question is, are the slides available? So Fiona, I will leave that at your discretion. If you would like to share the slides, we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. We can send them out afterwards.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. So yes, the slides will be available afterwards. So yeah, no, just a lot of thank yous. And is it possible to recording the slides? As always, the coffee mornings are recorded and they'll be up on our social channels later today. So yeah, lots of love in the chat for you, Fiona. So thank you
Great.
very much. That was really insightful.
Love to hear that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Right, Gemma. So let me introduce Gemma. So I'll let you take your slides down, Fiona, and Gemma can get prepared. So let me just introduce Gemma. So Gemma Baxter is the founder of Hive HR Solutions and a trusted HR partner in growing businesses across the UK. She works with business owners who want practical, tailored and proactive HR support that helps them navigate the complexities of managing people while staying focused on running their businesses. From day-to-day HR advice to strategic people planning, Gemma and her team help organisations create compliant, productive and engaged workplaces. She's passionate about making HR approachable and jargon-free, and Gemma and her team are known for translating complex employment issues into clear, actionable advice that business owners can understand and implement with confidence. So in this session, Gemma will explore the latest employment law developments and upcoming employment rights changes and share some practical insights to help all of our members here identify potential risks for their clients and signpost them to the right support at the time. I've worked with Gemma now for a while, and Gemma and her team are fabulous. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to you talk, Gemma. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. That was really kind. And thanks for inviting me to talk today. It's really nice to meet all of you, and I hope you find this talk helpful. So as Sarah has already said, bear with me. That I'm going to be sharing the latest employment law developments. I'm going to be sharing some upcoming employment law changes. I'm also going to be sharing some tips for identifying potential risks with your clients. And importantly, I'm going to be sharing kind of how you can signpost your clients to support. So most business owners don't wake up thinking about employment law, funny enough. Instead, they wake up thinking about sales. They think about their customers, their cash flow. So often employment law changes can come as a surprise. But the good news is that you guys are in a great position in terms of your trusted advisors to them. And that when they need support from you, they can ask you questions. And this is about arming you with some information. Because I'm sure you've heard clients say, I'm thinking of taking somebody on, we're reducing hours, I'm struggling to recruit, and so on. So as I said, I'm going to take you through lots of stuff today. So the big themes, and Fiona has covered some of this already, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail, and you're probably aware of some of this already. So in April 2026, the government changed statutory sick pay to be from day 1 instead of day 4, so no more waiting days. And they've also removed the earnings limit, so everyone is now entitled. But they also introduced paternity leave from day 1, again, removing the 26 weeks requirement. And they also did the same with parental leave from day 1. So what should employers do now, if they haven't done already, is to review their employment contracts. They should be looking for any clauses that might be in their contracts that refer to any of these entitlements. But they should also be looking at their policies and their handbooks and to update them to reflect these changes. And you may hear business owners, and you may have heard this already, where they say these changes are going to cost me a fortune. So there may be an opportunity to reduce absence levels with better sickness management. It doesn't mean that, it basically means that you want to try and kind of have that conversation, if you feel comfortable, to say, have they spoken to a HR consultant, or have they looked at ACAS about sickness management? Do they do return to work interviews? Do they have triggers for managing sickness? All of those things can really control absence cost. So that's that one. But what's coming up? So in January 2027, the government are basically changing the unfair dismissal qualifying period from 2 years to 6 months. This is a huge change. And what's important to know now is that the first employees who will acquire qualifying service on the 1st of January will begin employment on the 2nd of July this year. So what can we advise clients, and kind of talk through our approach really, is that is to sort of look at an impact assessment, is to review kind of your, like, the business's turnover in terms of staffing, and are people leaving kind of in terms of what's the probationary process, is that being managed really well? But for me, it's more than that. It isn't just about the probation period. If you think about when you're hiring somebody, if you get it right when you're in that recruitment process, you're asking the right questions, you're doing the right assessments, you've got a really good understanding of whether that person is going to be right for the business, and then you move through to an induction period. So you've highlighted you found the best person for the job. You've then moved into a really, hopefully, helpful induction process, because you might have found somebody with years and years of experience, but they don't know how you do things your way. So it's about giving them the best possible start with you, to really kind of reduce the need to end their employment during probation. So we're saying here to ensure recruitment and interview procedures appropriately assess competencies and suitability for the role, with key decision makers involved throughout the hiring process. But also to review your probation procedures. So do they effectively assess performance, conduct, suitability, and are your managers actively monitoring probation timelines? So we're suggesting, again, that employment contracts need to be updated, policy documents, employee handbooks, but kind of going that one step forward in terms of considering providing training to line managers to ensure they're confident managing these types of situations, but also maybe looking at your recruitment process. Are you confident that your recruitment process is going to find you the right people, so that this doesn't become a headache much further down the line? Okay. So there are some other changes that are coming in this year. So there's going to be electronic trade union balloting. So from August this year, introduction of e-balloting and workplace balloting for statutory union ballots. Unions will be able to conduct ballots digitally or in the workplace, making industrial action ballots easier and potentially increasing participation. But what is also changing, before you used to have a minimum number of employees to recognise a ballot and to recognise a union, you now only need one employee to basically invite that union to ballot in your organisation. So it's something to be aware of. It is quite a big change. And it's basically to give unions wider access to organisations. The other one is coming in October this year. So this is about a duty to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. So last year, back into 2024, we had the sexual harassment law come in, and more duty on employers to take preventative actions to prevent sexual harassment in their workplace. But this is about third-party harassment now. So it's about ensuring that employers understand that they have a duty to protect their employees from any third-party harassment. And have an example for you to sort of bring that to life a bit. So it's been reported that there was a school that engaged some contractors to undertake some building work inside the school, which is quite straightforward. But it was later discovered during an audit that one of those contractors was actually a convicted murderer. Now, in terms of school environment, you've got a massive safeguarding risk there. So it's about what should the school have done to avoid that risk and prevent that risk, most importantly. And they should have done more background checks on their contractors. So whilst they don't employ the contractors, it's a third party. So therefore, they are obligated to protect their workforce and the children that attend that school. Okay, so number 3, so also in October this year, they are looking to extend the Employment Tribunal limitation period to 6 months. So it's currently 3 months to bring a claim after an employee leaves the organisation. This is about highlighting that they believe that it's to make the justice system fairer and to make it more accessible to employees, rightly or wrongly. So there's been reports that has highlighted that the short 3-month window is disproportionately disadvantaged claimants, especially in discrimination or harassment cases, where they feel the psychological impact of whatever they've been through takes some time to get through, and that they believe they need to give them longer to make a claim. So that's coming in. It does play a part in terms of employers. So it does give the employer longer to settle out of court. So that's why they're also looking at it in terms of settling and giving those parties longer to do that. But then they're also looking at the Employment Tribunal compensation cap being removed in January 2027. So employment tribunals are no longer limited by a statutory compensation ceiling. So employers will no longer be able to assume that a maximum unfair dismissal award of 1 year's salary will be applied. So these changes are coming. They've been essentially agreed, and they are firmed up as coming in. Also in January 2027, there's going to be stronger limits on dismissing employees and rehiring them on worse terms. So you may hear clients talking about they need to change their contract. And they need everybody to sign that new contract because they need to change some terms within their organisation. They will no longer be able to do that except in very limited circumstances. Employers could face automatic unfair dismissal if they try to force it. This is going to be quite difficult for employers, I think, to get their head around in terms of how they go about making changes and how they encourage their employees to sign to new terms. So yeah, I think this is one to watch, definitely. And then 0 hours and low hours contract reforms. So this is currently being consulted on at government level. So this isn't definite that this is coming in or what the parameters are going to be. But this is all about giving kind of workers more predictable hours and shifts. 0 hours contracts are used quite widely. We have a number of clients that use 0 hour contracts because it gives the employer the flexibility when they need it most in terms of managing their workforce. And it does, and it should work both ways. So it should work in when you have a 0 hours contract in place with somebody, you're asking them, I'd like you to be able to do these shifts for me. The employee has the chance to be able to turn around and say, I'm afraid I can't do those shifts. Now, it doesn't always work like that in practice. And I think this is where the government is going with this. It's about making it fairer for both sides, both parties. So they're saying basically if this comes in, that employers will have to offer guaranteed regular hours to those 0 hours or low hour workers based on a reference period of 12 weeks. Again, this is quite a big change. But the government feels that it's not fair currently. So this is why they're looking at this. Okay, so You guys are in the best possible position to be able to help your clients. So I've kind of put some speech bubbles up to think about what you might want to listen out for. You're not expected to have all the answers, but just listening out for these types of questions and then thinking about what question you might ask back. So we're taking someone on a 3-month trial. And you could say, well, have you reflected this correctly in the contract and probation requirements? I'm letting somebody go. Have you spoken to a HR advisor? We're taking on 3 new employees. Great. Have your contracts and onboarding processes been reviewed recently? So this is just to get, I guess, for you to do as best you can to help them to realize that they might need to get some advice. These small conversations can prevent expensive problems in the future. And then some phrases that should make your ears prick up. So I'm getting rid of someone, they're still on probation, we've cut their hours, we're hiring, they've asked to work flexibly, they're pregnant, we're using casual workers. You don't need to know the answer, you just need to recognize where there might be a question. And lastly, where could you signpost clients? So I've put here, and I will share the slides after as well, as Fiona has said she would, so that's not an issue. So in terms of like ACAS is always a good one for getting a very kind of balanced view about guidance and templates and best practice. And when all this legislation comes in, that legislation will be basically articulated on the ACAS website. So if you need more information or your clients do, that's where they should go. Also, the gov.uk website, it's got statutory updates, employment rights information, and then HR consultants. So again, it's about, they could go to ACAS and find the information that they need, but if they need help with actually that, taking it to that next step in helping like reviewing documents or producing documents or talking through a particular issue, that's where you'd contact a HR consultant. And then employment lawyers. So employment lawyers are the ones you'd want to be going to when you've got a tribunal risk, or you've got a particularly complex case that you feel that you need that advice from. So yeah, so those are just some signposted resources that I put up there for you. These employment rights changes shouldn't be viewed as something to fear. They're simply part of an evolving workplace. The businesses that will cope best with these changes aren't necessarily the biggest businesses. They're actually the businesses that want to stay informed. They ask questions, they seek support early, they want to be proactive. And as accountants and bookkeepers, you are often in quite a unique position to spot risks, ask questions, and help them identify what could be a costly problem if they don't deal with it. So you don't need to know all the answers, as I've said, but just being able to listen out for those kind of questions and comments that your clients might be using. And sometimes the most valuable thing is being able to ask a question back, like I've highlighted in the speech bubbles. So that's it from me. Again, I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat, so happy to answer any questions, but also we'll share the slides after. I know employment law can be quite dry, so I hope you enjoyed it.
Gemma, that was absolutely fantastic. And again, the chat's very quiet. I think everyone's just been listening. There was a lot of information there, really, really, really helpful.
Yeah.
What I will say though is I would absolutely recommend that if you're providing payroll services to one of your clients, that you speak to your clients and you're really, really clear about what your role is and what an HR consultant is, because they are 2 different jobs and they run in parallel.
Yes.
I know many of our, clients that we service will assume that as the payroll provider, we are by default the HR expert. We are not. We need to be aware of this, and we need to be able to signpost our clients to somewhere where they can get comprehensive HR advice. It also makes our job an awful lot easier if we are able to have that resource that we can go to, which is outside of the calculating the figures, because it's a much more complex, I suppose, environment now, isn't it? And I suppose, as Gemma's just described, the legislation gets ever more complex, and I think also the penalties become higher, and as you alluded to there as well, in certain circumstances, uncapped. So I suppose our job as a bookkeeper accountant is to make sure that our clients are aware where our responsibilities stop, and that we would recommend that they engage with someone like Gemma, or Gemma's company rather. So questions? Well, no, just lots and lots of thank you to both speakers. Yeah, no questions. Just there's one question here from Joyce. Gemma, do you do partnerships with payroll only bureaus?
Do you mean, so the person that asked this question, I'm assuming you mean in terms of, so because we don't do payroll as an organization, so do you mean in terms of we would, if we got a question about payroll, we would absolutely pass it over to a partner, and we don't currently have a payroll partner.
Joyce, is that what you meant?
Is that what you meant,
One
Joyce?
of our ambassadors. Actually, where is Joyce? Do you want to take this
Hi,
on?
Gemma. Sorry,
Yeah.
and hi, Sarah.
Yeah.
So, no, what I meant was I've got lots of payroll-only clients that haven't got a HR department, so they asked me for help with the contracts for their employees. So I'm wondering if you would partner with someone like me to offer that service to my clients through, working together.
Yeah, of course we would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to do something like that, actually. Yes.
Okay.
By all means. Yeah.
We'll connect through Sarah then. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, anything like that in terms of, but also we do get asked if we do payroll, and I say no. So it's like health and safety. No, we don't do health and safety either. So it's nice to have some people that I can also pass those kinds of clients to as well.
Okay, thank you, Gemma.
No problem.
So I don't think there's actually any other questions as such. Again, just sort of loving the chat. So thank you to both speakers. It's been really, really comprehensive talks this morning. So very grateful for that. Again, request for the recording. The recordings will be up live later on today. So I'm going to let everyone go early and just have one comment left to say, which is, come on, England, which we're watching this evening.
Fantastic. So thank you for having us this morning. It's been really good.
Yeah,
no, I'm really grateful for you to be here. So thank you very much. Right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.